wolves howling in apartment 3. Vampires have a midnight book club tea. Mummy's jogging with his bandages loose. Frankenstein's charging his phone with the lightning boost. Oh, the neighbors are strange, but they're kinda cool. A ghoul in the pool, zombies breaking the rules. Don't mind the creaks or the occasional roar, 'cause there's more monsters next door. Invisible man keeps stealing my fries. Creature from the lagoon's got chlorine in his eyes. Dracula's mirror is cracked, no reflection to see. And the skeletons DJing at the local spree. Spiders in the mailbox, bats in the tree. A haunted house party every night for free. Oh, the neighbors are strange, but they're kinda cool. Ghoul in the pool, zombies breaking the rules. Don't mind the creaks or the occasional roar, 'cause there's more monsters next door. More monsters next door. More monsters next door.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Damn Show on the Critical Blast podcast. I'm your host, Damascus Mintzmeyer. Our regular host, RJ Cutter, is off on a top-secret archaeological expedition to raid the Lost Ark in Egypt. Don't worry, though, he'll be back tomorrow. And in the meantime, I'll be interviewing author Andrew K. Clark, whose latest novel, Where Dark Things Rise, was released September 16th by Quill and Crow Publishing. For the next hour, we'll be talking about Appalachian horror, shadow creatures, 80s nostalgia, and just what makes mixtapes so damn cool. Hi, Andrew.
Hey, Damascus. It's awesome to be on with you. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, it's nice to have you back as a guest. It's been about a year since you were here the last time. So why don't you refresh our audience's memory by answering this question?
Sure.
Who are you, what do you do, and why do you do it?
Yeah, so Andrew Clark. I am a writer from Western North Carolina, so the Southern Appalachians, which are prominent in my work. And why do I do it? Because I can't not do it.
Yeah, I understand that. People always ask me that question too, and I'll be like, well, I don't really have much of a choice. The ideas come, and I got to get them out of there somehow.
It's a bit of a compulsion, I think, at some point, but pretty rewarding when you can get the idea out on the page, and even more rewarding when the reader finds it. That's pretty cool.
That's right. So, Where Dark Things Rise is a sequel to your first novel, Where Dark Things Grow. Why don't you refresh our audience's memory about that initial book? Because it really lays the foundation for the new novel.
Yeah, so the first novel in the duology, people keep asking if it's a trilogy. I think it's just a duology. Never say never, of course, but that one is Where Dark Things Grow. It's set in the 1930s, Great Depression, Asheville, North Carolina area. We have some teenagers that are dealing with some ancient evil that is cropping up. Some friends of theirs go missing and they get pulled into a bit of a rescue plan. And one of the characters figures out he can wield a magical beast called a wolver. And so that's the first novel. And one of the things that happened is I am not a fan of the tidy, happy ending. And so when I got to the end of that book, I had something that was sort of like a happy ending, and I just couldn't leave it alone. So I added something at the end, which was turns out a bit of a cliffhanger. And so some of my beta readers and folks that were discovering the book were saying, I can't wait to read the next one. And I was like, oh, no. I didn't know I was going to be writing another one. But I knew I had this 80s horror novel in me. And so I started thinking about how they could connect. So the next novel picks up with the teenagers in the first book are actually grandparents, or that in their 70s in this book. And so we have a new set of teenagers that have to deal with this ancient evil, which has returned.
Yeah, let's talk about some of these new characters. Bring us in. Bring us like tell us about the cast because I
Yeah,
really like a lot of the teenagers in this.
yeah. So we have Mina, which is really the main character of the novel. So Mina is 16 years old. She's growing up in a trailer park in Western North Carolina area, and so she is a bit frustrated by life in general. She's got some issues with dad. Dad is a bit of a drinker, and mom is a sort of a religious zealot. And the other thing she finds is when she goes to school, even though she has amazing grades like a 4.0 GPA, the teachers don't take her seriously because she's the girl from the trailer park. And we also see that some of the other kids don't take her seriously. Maybe the country club boys think she's going to be easy prey, and it turns out that they need to be a little more fearful of her. So she's the main character. We also have Gabe, who has a crush on Mina. He is 16; they're the same age, and tries over the course of the novel to kind of win her heart, if you will. I'll let readers decide if that actually happens, but suffice it to say, when we get kicked off, he's a lot more interested in her than she is in him. His grandfather actually was part of the first novel. He's Leo from the first novel. And so, because Leo has connections to some of this magic, it starts to creep in, and Gabe is pursued by a shape shifting preacher. And then we have Aaron and Lucas, which are their sort of best friends. Aaron is Mina's best friend, and then Lucas is Gabe's friend. And it happens that Lucas and Aaron wind up they're dating, and so they kind of get pulled into a couple of double dating type situations, particularly on Halloween, and things go awry.
That's right. So you mentioned that you didn't really plan out a sequel for to Where Dark Things Grow. At what point did you know what the story was going to be for the sequel?
Yes, so I think again, because I didn't like the tidy ending, all my beta readers early on were like, "You got to write another book, got to write another book." And so I toyed initially with ideas of having the next book just pick up right when the other one ended, and I just felt like I wanted to leave that world, and it was going to be maybe too similar if we stayed in that world. And so what I wanted to play out was like, okay, so one of the characters in the first book lets go of this sort of dark power that he can wield. And I wanted to see, like, what does his life turn out like? And then another character doesn't let go and actually digs deeper in it. And I wanted to kind of explore like what that corrupting force does to him. So I think when I first started thinking about it, I was like, I think I want to skip ahead a little bit. And then again, I knew that I wanted to write, being an 80s kid, like I wanted to write an 80s novel. So I started doing the math. Like, okay, they would be in their 70s. So that's kind of fun, right? And then they're sort of this generation of grandchildren or kids that would be, kind of the grandchildren for these characters would be fun to play with. And then I could have my 80s novel and have it connect into the first book.
Did you draw on your own teenage years when you were conceiving the project?
I did. And one thing that's kind of interesting about that is we have some false memories about when things happened. And so one thing that I realized is in the first book, I knew I had to do a lot of research because it was set in the 30s. I could draw on my grandparents, great uncles, great aunts, and elders in my church and so forth for the voices. I knew I could capture the voices of these Appalachian characters who are of that generation. But I knew I needed to do a lot of research in terms of like what the city was like when things turned south for Asheville in terms of the Great Depression and all that. And so I did a lot of research for it. And so when I got to this 80s book, I didn't feel like I had to do that. And so that led to some mistakes that beta readers caught, that we caught in the editorial process and so forth, expressions that I thought we were saying in 1987 that didn't come into like mainstream use until like 1993. Things like that came up. And it was, again, just because of my sort of false memory. I couldn't remember when those things, those phrases were popular or whatever. But So in some ways, I had to in the editorial process or rewriting process, do more research than I actually thought I would have to do because, again, I'm an 80s kid, so like this is my world, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was doing beta reading for a story just a few weeks ago from one of my friends, and it was set in 1987. And
Nice.
they used the term Debbie Downer in there, and I was like, no, 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 no. And I was like, that's from like the 2000s. And they're
Yeah,
like,
no,
for
that you're,
real? And I was like,
you're right. And
and I
it's
was
funny. Well, it's funny you give that example because the one that I used was when someone looks at something and to be dismissive, they'll say something like, "Hey, 1975 called. They want that dress back." Right.
like,
Well, I just knew we were saying that as teenagers. It turns out it first appeared in Saturday Night Live, just like Debbie Downer, but in 1993. And so, and actually a friend of mine who's my age is the one that brought to my, he was one of my beta readers and he brought that to my attention. I argued with him. I was very indignant. And so, yeah, our memories aren't the best sometimes. So we have to kind of do a little bit of research and dig in on certain things. And there was another situation where I was trying to describe the inside of a 1987 Camaro IROC and getting that wrong because I'd ridden in one several years later. And so then having to kind of like look at a lot of pictures online and try to figure out the sort of what this car looks like on the inside.
there's in one of the W Know anthologies that Critical Blast put out, I wrote a story called Ricky Tan that was set in 1984.
Nice.
And I was like you, I like putting all the pop culture references in there, but I was like you, I knew I had to really do my research because it was set on like a very specific day. It was set on like a Sunday in July, like 1984. So I was like there was this one character watching TV. So I was doing all this research, like looking up what the TV schedules were to see actually what station, what shows were on what network, like on a Sunday, just trying to get it all right. Because, there's going to be, you don't think it, but there's always going to be one person who knows.
Oh,
there's always going to be one person out there who's like, yeah, this is wrong. And I'll be like, okay.
So that's, so you do the best you can. I mean, I don't consider these novels historical fiction, but I did want them to be sort of, the way I look at it is to have the realistic aspect, be realistic as much as possible. They're talking animals and shapeshifters. Those aren't, I don't think they're real. I haven't encountered them yet. Maybe I will. I'm open to it. But, I did want to get those facts as accurate as I could.
Yeah, we were talking about Mina. She was my favorite character. And when we first start the book, it actually, you make it think that Gabe is actually the main character. But as it progresses, Mina slowly comes to the forefront. And I really loved her personality. I liked her determination to rise above her trailer park upbringing. And she doesn't want to fall in love with Gabe because she doesn't want to get tied down because she sees that her mother was tied down and she doesn't want to end up with like a kid when she's really young and not be able to escape like small town life.
Right.
And I when I was a very, very small kid, I lived in some trailer parks here and there. And as you described that whole atmosphere very, very well. And I just want to know what went into creating her as a character and what made you make her the inheritor of Leo's like shadow power instead of Gabe.
Yeah, I think what I was trying to do, and there's kind of a parallel with Gabe, obviously in the first novel, and Mina in the second. And so one thing that I'm trying to excavate is like, power that suddenly comes to the powerless, right? So if you think about Gabe in the first novel, he has no power whatsoever. He's a teenager. Adults don't take him seriously. His family is struggling and poor. Dad is missing. And so, kind of community sort of shuns the family. And so there's no power. And all of a sudden he has this great power. And what does he do with that? And how does it affect him? Does it corrupt him? Does he, he's maybe, well, no spoilers, but, he has really good intentions when things kick off. And so Mina is a little bit of a parallel, right? So she is that 1987 version of that, living in a trailer park, dismissed by teachers, dismissed by the community. And yeah, that's that expectation that you're just going to start having babies and stay, where you grew up. And so Mina's whole thing is like, I'm not going to date anybody. I'm not interested in dudes or like anything that's going to tie me down. Like I'm going to leave. I'm going to go to college. That's the way she sees her ticket out. And so she's very reluctant to have any kind of like real relationships because of that. But, she struggles with the same sort of issue, like the corrupting influence of power. So we have that expression, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? And
Mhm.
so she struggles with those same sort of demons. She has the ability to do great things or terrible things, and so that's a struggle for her in terms of like how she's going to parse that and figure out like what her place is in the world, given the ability that she can rise up by virtue of these powers.
Yeah, and at first, there's another parallel to her and Leo in the first book is that they're first like tempted to use the power for like revenge,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yes.
and I won't give anything away either, but they that's like the initial temptation. One of my favorite sequences in the new book is the Halloween party
Yes.
when she's in the barn and her and Gabe they're doing hallucinogens and the way you describe it is like you don't even know if it's really happening or not, but
Yeah.
it turns out she's unleashing some of her inner demons on some of the kids who were not so nice to her.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. The Halloween scene was my favorite to write, and it's probably my favorite to go back and read. That, and then we have some chapters late in the novel with Leo struggling with dementia, and those were also like kind of emotional to write. I've had multiple family members impacted, by dementia, and so I wanted to try to accurately capture that, and so they were kind of emotional to write. But that Halloween sequence, you're exactly right, and again, they do shrooms, and so I wanted to play with that. But it was so much fun to kind of like have the reader wondering about what was real and what wasn't real, and then in the end, you find out some of it was absolutely real. But that whole it was kind of fun, and it's a little bit of a that's maybe the moment, that Halloween sequence, where Mina lets her guard down a little bit with Gabe and starts to allow there to be like an attraction or feelings there. And so that was really fun to kind of try to capture as well. What their sort of connection is by virtue of like they're really high and they've been drinking alcohol and all that kind of stuff. And there's sort of this surreal things happening to them in that moment.
Yeah, you were talking about Leo. One of the most tragic parts of the book is watching him, because he was the hero of the first book, and watching him older, like succumb to dementia progressively is like
Yes.
heartbreaking. That was absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah.
The
It was hard
chapter,
to write.
the chapter where he's like in the basement talking to Gabe,
Yes.
and he knows like what he's supposed to do, and he wants to go after the main villain, and he
Right.
knows that Lilyfax is like hidden the guns, and
Yes.
he knows what he's supposed to do, but he can't remember what it is that he's supposed to do, but he knows he has to do it.
Right.
And then he'll get like brief flashes of it. That was so heartbreaking.
I tried to with trying to capture that. If you've been around someone with dementia, you have these moments of like crystal clear lucidity, right, where everything is they're like the person they were prior to having dementia. And so we see that with Leo, a couple times. He sort of fades in and out. And my grandmother had dementia, and that would happen where you'd be having this very cogent conversation, and then maybe an hour later, or the sun goes down or something. They call it sundowner syndrome, where they get affected a little bit more at night. And so she would at that time like think I was somebody else. And so we had just a few hours before had this very crystal clear conversation. She's reading a book. She's able to like read and follow along the book. And then a couple hours later, like doesn't know who I am. So it's tragic and sad, and so it was hard to write, and it was hard to give a character that I loved so much from the first book, that to deal with. But it is the reality of people as they age, that we all succumb to something, and so I thought that would be an interesting thing to play with in terms of he has this mission, but he's struggling because at times he doesn't even remember. He can't remember how to drive home, like how to get home. He goes downtown and gets lost. Things like that.
You were talking about sundown syndrome. You also make a parallel. I've noticed a couple times in the novel, because the main villain likes to come out at night, and he's like walking and stalking and watching around Leo's house, like at nighttime. So there's like a parallel between the sundown syndrome of the dementia, and also because the villain likes to come out at night, and there's like a parallel between those two things.
Yeah, and I think
descending darkness
Yeah.
there.
In our imaginations, we often imagine evil things happening at night. Sometimes they do, because the villains or the bad people in the real world can get away with things in the dark they can't get away with in the sunlight. So yeah, I appreciate that you picked up on that, because that was something I was thinking about. Was like, not only is he becoming less lucid, but that's when the bad things are happening, right?
Yeah. So let's talk about the villain, Ezra, because he was in the first book. He was an ally of Leo and Lily Pax when they were going to fight the evil Blue Man in his
Hmm.
temple. And as you pointed out before, he and Leo both were tempted by the power, but as opposed to Leo coming to terms with it, he turned very, very inward with it, and he really wanted that power. Like, he sought
Right.
it out.
Right.
And we see a glimpse of that when he's still a kid at the end of the very first book.
Hmm.
And as an adult, he has his own ministry, but he's using the ministry really as like a front to just further his own ends to get more power.
Right.
And he in this book, after he's achieved his powers, it's started to corrupt him. And I was thinking, what was the idea behind leading Ezra down such a dark path? Did you know that he was going to be, when you started the book, that he was going to be like the villain, so to speak?
Yeah, I knew that right away. And I think, one thing I planted seeds in the first book, he's kind of a seeker in the first book. So in an innocent way, he wants answers to like life's questions. He's reads philosophy. He reads and tries to listen to different preachers to see what they know. And he even in the first book is interested in trying to visit a cult, so that he can see, kind of what they do. The Gelders is what I called the cult in the first book. And so, and so when I decided that I wasn't going to have the tidy, happy ending, he was the natural place to do that. And what I really wanted to say is, even though some of the book may have this feeling of like good versus evil, that there's not like this moment of triumph, right? And I don't think the real world works that way either, where the good guys always win, and the bad guys are dispatched and get justice. That's obviously not true, right? Just look around the dumpster fire of the world that we're in, and so you can see that that's not true. So he was sort of the natural person, because I had set him up as this seeker. He was the natural person to be seduced by the evil at the end of the first book. And so when I got into the second book, I was like, yeah, he's definitely, and I wanted that kind of like parallel too between the choice he makes and the choice that Leo makes. So Leo chooses to let go of it, winds up having, a happy life, children, a beautiful marriage, things like that. But I hope that stuff comes through in the novel. And
oh yes, definitely.
Ezra made the opposite choice. And I also thought it'd be fun to see, like, okay, so what if Leo had like fully embraced the evil and like stayed there, wallowed in it, if you will. So Ezra's that example. That's what would have happened to Leo if he had not let go of like his hate and anger and all those things.
And he attains, like, Ezra from an external perspective is very successful. Like from
Yes.
the external, because he has a ministry, he's on TV, he's on the radio, he has hundreds, maybe thousands of followers.
Right.
So he has lots of money. He has, he can command people to do whatever the hell he wants them to do.
Yes.
So from an external perspective, he looks like he's very successful. But as you said, he doesn't have anyone who loves them. He doesn't have anyone that he actually loves.
No.
He doesn't have a marriage, doesn't have any kids. He's sacrificed all of that just to get power.
And you're right. His ministry is a front for the evil that he winds up doing. And, sort of my theory there is probably that, even though he has these things that are the outward markers of success, sometimes, bad people just like, that's not enough, right? They just keep sort of going. And so that's what happens to him is none of those things matter. It's about the attainment of more and more power. And, unfortunately, we see those parallels, like I said, in the real world, where people suddenly have power. And initially, you can kind of look at their biographies sometimes, and they are very interested in like what's good for the greater mankind, right? They're very interested in that.
Yeah.
Over time, we see and unfortunately, sometimes that power corrupts them to where they don't care about those things anymore. It's about what's in it for them and like maybe their immediate family or friends or network or whatever, and everybody else can sort of go to hell. And so
Right.
it's one of those things like you write, and it's like, am I being too hard on this villain? Am I being inaccurate? And then I could just like open the news and be like, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm actually, actually some of the stuff that happens in the real world is even worse than like what a horror novelist can imagine.
It's like the Elon Musk effect, like, so to speak.
That's the example that I would give. When he first started, if you watch those early interviews with him, it's all about like improving the lives of greater mankind, and that does not seem to be of interest to him anymore, right?
No.
And you got to wonder, like, that absolute power and absolute wealth where no one tells you no or can tell you no, and you have that sort of fuck you money that you can throw around. I think we all would like to think we're sort of idealistic enough that we would be not tempted in that way, but I think that it would be very difficult for anyone to be like the richest man on the planet and not think that I can do no wrong, right?
That is absolutely true, because everybody is a mix of light and dark, good and evil. It's just some have more of one than the other, but it's all there. We all have it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And there's another parallel, because the 80s was where you saw the rise of like the televangelist. That's where you saw the rise. You saw like Tammy Faye. What was her name? Husband's name?
Baker, Jim Baker, yes. And then of course we had like the
Jimmy
Dobson,
Swaggart, all that kind of stuff.
So that was part of like what I wanted to capture in terms of the 80s, right? That was a big thing in sort of my upbringing and childhood, and sort of like seeing that happening, where you had this commercialization of religion and sort of monetization of it. And also I think that led to like what we call like the prosperity gospel, this sort of notion that if I'm a really good Christian, like I'm going to be blessed with money and wealth, and I won't have any illnesses in my family or anything like that, which is just ridiculous.
Right.
And it's not based in reality. But I kind of wanted to capture that. And that's one thing that led me down the path of, there's a sequence in the novel that's focused on conversion therapy. I grew up in a household where we listened to Dr. James Dobson. My mother listened to him every day. And he constantly talked about how we could convert, gay people to, toward a heterosexual lifestyle. And even as a kid, although I didn't have language for it, I wasn't as well read as I am now and so forth. I felt like there was so much injustice in that. Just even as a kid, I was like, I had friends who were gay, whether they were out or not, whether they felt they could be out or not, like we intuitively knew. And it just like, it felt like there was this real lack of justice. And so I when I said in the 80s, I knew I was going to have this religious element. And then I did wind up doing a lot of research and interviewing folks for the conversion therapy piece.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question, because there's a lot of scary stuff in the novel, the shadow entities, demons, kidnappings, but by far the part that scared me the most was when Aaron was at the conversion youth camp. Just the mistreatment. The mistreatment, the abuse. She was enduring mental, emotional, physical abuse, starvation, sleep deprivation, and it was just horrifying. And just when you think it couldn't get any worse, it kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I was just like, and I was going to ask you where that came from, but you described that very well.
Yeah, again, it was something that was in my consciousness, and then as I realized this was going to be a theme in the book, I watched a lot of documentaries. And then a friend here in town introduced me to a lady by the name of Allison Scott, who went through conversion therapy. And so she interviewed me, like we spent like a couple hours together, or I interviewed her, I should say. And so it was very enlightening. So a lot of the things that I describe in the book actually happened in different conversion camp therapies. There is a supernatural element, obviously, that I introduced that I don't think they experienced. And, I may, in some areas, go like a little bit stronger than the actual experience, but there was for example, I don't want to give too much away, but in the novel, there's this idea that the camp counselors are trying to let you know what hell feels like by sitting you near a fire, right?
That part was very, very scary.
That's real. Like that happened. People did that. And so maybe not to the extreme that I go with it. I'm a horror novelist. I got to go there, right? But those concepts were introduced, and there was sleep deprivation and things like that. Sort of trying to break people down so that they would be open to accepting the idea that their genuine identity was evil and wrong, so that they would turn from it. So there was a lot of psychological kind of I would say abuse in conversion
definitely
therapy.
But it also proves the point, because one of my favorite themes in horror that I like to explore is that because I see a lot of parallels in horror. Whenever I think to myself, why do I like it, and why do other people actually like horror as a genre, is because you can identify with the monster, you can identify with the devil, you can identify with the madman, whatever. There's that sense of otherness, because especially when I was younger, I always felt like a misfit, and it was like I could identify with that in horror a lot.
Yes.
And it also goes to, like, in this book, like, the truest monsters in this aren't necessarily shadow creatures. It's actually people. Like, and there's that old saying with all monsters are human. And the conversion camp scenes and Ezra, that proves the point that, the humans are actually the people in their dark heart with the scariest part.
They are. And I think that, horror gives us that means to kind of excavate those things. But you're absolutely right. And if you had your monsters do some of the things that humans do, people would be like, that monster's too mean. They're like,
That's right.
So in some ways, like, it's unfortunately, it's realistic. That human, there are people who have bad intentions and will use religion as a weapon against other people who think differently than them, and it's hard to understand sometimes, but again, there's this kind of selfishness and lack of empathy, I think, that's at the heart of all these things. And so it's hard to write characters that really don't have that empathy and those kind of things. But that's real. I think it's real.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. And that lack of empathy, as you're pointing out, because I've actually written characters before that and an editor will send me something saying nobody would actually do this, nobody would behave that way, and it's like I've legit based it on somebody real. Like
that's happened to me. There is the novel is probably mostly focused on issues of class, but I do deal with misogyny and racism. And there's a scene where some racism happens that a beta reader said, like, I don't think that would happen. And I said, that happened at my high school. Right?
Yeah.
So it's we have some distance from that time period now, and maybe have some rose-colored glasses about it. But it was very, very real and very kind of, in your face. So there, as modern readers may read things and be like, I don't think that people really thought that. Well, they did. They did.
Yeah.
And we have to tell the truth about it. That's what I think.
So talking about the 80s, how fun was it to insert all the nostalgic references into the book? Because music plays an important part in Where Dark Things Rise. There's references to Prince, Rat, Bon Jovi. What were your favorite musicians from that era?
Yeah, so I was a big Prince head, and so that's why probably he's the first one mentioned, and he's Gabe's favorite. But it was a lot of fun. I think it was a big part of the culture, and we had kind of a unique experience, kids in the 80s. One thing that I really love is the cover of the novel has a Walkman on it, and so that was a new thing in the 80s. And so there was this ability that you could put headphones on and listen to music sort of privately and listen to whatever you wanted. That was kind of a new experience, kids
and it was portable. And that was the other important thing. And it was portable also. That was the other key thing.
Yeah. So you had your batteries, so you could listen to it at the bus stop, you could listen to it on the bus, and even if you had recess, sometimes you could listen to it there, whatever. And so that was a unique experience. Kids today, like that's sort of laissez-faire because they've had iPods and then iPhones and so forth. But for us, like that was really new. Like we were doing something cool that my uncles didn't have that. They had 8-track cassettes in their car, right? And so they didn't have a sort of a personal portable music. And so that's a big part of the culture. So we kind of get to see like what was on Gabe's Walkman, what's on Mina's, and even like class distinction between Gabe has a Walkman, like the Sony, the branded Walkman, and Mina has the knockoff, and is very kind of self-conscious about the fact that hers is not the name brand one. And it's kind of hard for people to understand that didn't live through it. But if you think about the early 2000s and the way kids were with their white headphones and their iPods, there were certainly other music players, but there was a big awareness of who had the real thing and who didn't. And I saw that with my kids.
That was big in the 80s. Yeah.
Yeah. Big
designer labels. Everything was designer labels.
Everything had to be designer labels. It was that sort of period of the sort of yuppie fashion and all this. So all that's in the novel. And there's this contrast with, the sort of local kids who don't have those things. And again, feeling self-conscious about what they have to wear. Mina, for much of the novel, she has to wear sundresses because that's all she has. So it's wintertime. She has a winter coat over her sundress because that's all the clothes she has.
It was also because 80s was also the MTV generation. That was like the first where you had the marriage of music and visuals together and sort of like a commercialized commodity. And the other thing I like is how you play with each character has like their own individual taste in music.
Yes.
Because back then it was very much a thing. You couldn't cross genres back then. Like nowadays, everyone's got their iPod, their iPhone. Like I've got metal, I've got rap, I've got old goth rock, I've got punk, it's all on there. Back then you were one thing or the other. Like you were either into punk.
I think that's right. And so it was fun to kind of see okay, so I have this character that's kind of a douchebag, right? Not really.
Yeah. Emerson. That's right. He was into
jerk.
Yeah, he was into hair metal. Yeah.
Yeah, he was into Whitesnake and stuff like that. And nobody don't at me. Like Whitesnake has some good songs, but it was fun to kind of think through okay, so if they're at a Halloween party and there's a bonfire and they're dancing, what are they going to play? It's okay, well, they're probably these country kids are playing Def Leppard, right? So Def Leppard and Bon Jovi, I think, make an appearance at the Halloween party. And of course, Mina is a big fan of the Rocky Horror soundtrack.
Right.
So that's
and Gabe's into Prince.
Gabe's into Prince. And, Mina's into Rush, Pink Floyd, and Rocky Horror. I think Erin's kind of all over the place, but she would be like a Madonna fan.
Yeah,
sure.
Definitely. Because back then it was very thing you couldn't cross genres. You were either one thing or the other. I don't think the genres really started breaking down until the 90s. I think when you could when it was also acceptable to everything.
Well, and I think modern music we've had in the last decade or so, or a couple decades maybe. You have sort of the freedom of the country star to play with rap and the rap stars.
Right.
And so there's just a little more cross-pollination. It was a little more segregated, to your point, by race and so forth. And also the radio stations really controlled what we heard. There was no Spotify mood, playlist that you could get into. Right. Record companies control what was in the stores. Yeah, and I was going to say, Scott asked about the grits. Grits do make a appearance in this novel for anybody that's curious.
Thank you for watching, Chili. Chili is one of my friends on Discord.
Awesome.
So Andrew, mixtapes were really big back then. Were you the kind of kid that made a lot of mixtapes?
I made a ton of mixtapes, and I made I made them to listen to. So it was kind of sometimes singles would come out and it would be forever before the album came out. So you would, sit there poised by the radio trying to hear the intro of the song that you wanted. And you'd be so pissed off if the DJ talked over it when you or if they came in early or faded it out early. You were so angry. So I made a lot of mixtapes, made mixtapes for girls and friends, and had people make mixtapes for me. And yeah, so it's a big part of the culture. I guess we have playlists now. It doesn't quite hit the same way as like, handing someone something that you spent
Yeah.
hours putting together for them, right?
Yeah,
It
because
was a
you
long
could.
time. You couldn't just drag and drop your tracks, right? You
That's
had
right.
to, if you recorded, like if you had a dual cassette recorder where you could, stick your Rolling Stones album in one and then mixtape in the other, like you had to like sync those up, hit
Mhm.
pause at the end, put your new one in. Like it was a lot of work, big investment of time.
But that was a way you could also make friends because it was. I mean, there was mixtape like trading
Yeah, yeah.
circles and stuff.
I mean, I got turned on to so much good music that way that I wouldn't have found myself, and so it was a lot of fun because you had again you had ideas of what popular music was from the radio, but if you had like a new kid moves to your school and they're like they got all this cool stuff from like college radio down in Athens, Georgia, or something like you're like your whole world could open up and it's like, oh, there's this band called New Order and there's all these other things that I didn't know about.
Yeah, people like I've got this theory that like people forget that in the pre-internet age, like there was such things as like social media and stuff before the internet. It was just in a different form because you
Right.
had like I mean, like I remember magazines and comic books used to have letters columns where people would go back and forth and give their opinions, and they'd jump on each other. And those
Yeah.
classified ads. And the other thing was like I was talking about mixtape trading circles, and there was also like alternative like underground zines and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
there was that kind of mindset has been around for a long time. It just wasn't digitalized, so to speak. But
Yeah. No,
mixtape, very good
you're
way to make friends were mixtapes. And
absolutely.
VHS tapes also.
It was a way to make friends, to discover new music. It was a way to like court each other. If a girl made me a mixtape, it was like this, huge moment. Like, wow, maybe she likes me, that kind of thing. So it was a big deal, and we invested a lot of time in getting it right. It was like the order of the tracks. That's another part of it as well. Is like getting the order right,
That's right. So they flow. You got to get it so they flow right.
Yeah, if you have a ballad on there, like it can't be first, right? It's got to be a little bit deeper in, kind of like, get some energy and then you bring in the ballad or whatever.
Yeah, that enabled people to be like their own personal DJ, so to speak, like for the very first time.
I think
because before that was very much the realm of like stuff on the radio until because then you could make your own, you could be your own DJ for the first time ever.
I think you're right. I can't think of an example where we could before that because with records you really couldn't do it. You couldn't do it with 8 tracks or anything else. So it was the first time. I love that kids create playlists and things today, and I obviously create playlists of stuff that I like. I did create a playlist that's on Spotify for this book, and so all the different references of songs that come up and they're on certain characters' Walkmans, like they're on a playlist on Spotify. If you go look for it.
So you published Where Dark Things Grow through your own Cowboy Jamboree Press, and the new book is published through Quill and Crow Publishing. What made you decide to have them release a sequel? Did they come to you, or did you go to them? I was curious about that.
Jamboree Press actually is not my press. It's there's a editor. No, it's a gentleman named Adam Van Winkle.
I didn't know that.
See, it's one of those things like I meet people like Adam Van Winkle. He's a writer, an editor, and then I meet a Damascus Mintzmeyer, and I think like, why didn't I get one of those cool writer names? But so they're a press out of South Carolina, and actually by way of like Texas. He's from Texas originally, so they have a lot of sort of grit lit type work, but they have been doing some more speculative work. They've got a book coming out next year from a lady named Barbara Beyer that I got to read that is fantastic and has this mix kind of like what I think I'm doing in terms of like gritty realism with the fantastical and speculative elements. And it's just a fantastic book called In the Desert that I'm looking forward to reading. Anyway, so Cowboy Jamboree Press did the first book, and then I had sent something to Quill and Crow Press, Quill and Crow Publishing House, prior to that book being picked up. And so when we started talking after that, and they wanted to see this book, and it made a lot of sense. I really like what they do with their titles, their sort of Gothic literature and so forth. And so it seemed like a natural move to make. But I had a great experience with Cowboy Jamboree. Those folks were amazing. So, you're always, as a writer, very, you feel very blessed when folks accept your work, when they get so many hundreds, and in some cases thousands of submissions that they have to cull through. So it means a lot, and I'm very thankful.
Yeah, we were talking on Threads the other day about creators being the product of their influences, so to speak.
Yes.
What authors or filmmakers had an impact on you growing up?
Yeah, so I would say, like, the first reading that I got into were fantasy novels. So it was Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, things like that. And so, I read all those books multiple times, and still every few years we'll go back and read the Lord of the Rings, books. And so that's already in my sort of way of thinking, that interest in the supernatural, type things. As I matured as a reader, like, I started to read more of the Southern writers, or Faulkner, Flannery O'Connor, things like that. And then one thing that I discovered is this genre of writing called magical realism. So that's your Gabriel Garcia Marquez, it's your Murakami, Salman Rushdie as well. And so what I liked about them is they took the things that I liked from, my Stephen King and Anne Rice horror novels, and they mixed some of those things into like a real world setting. So that sort of academic definition of magical realism is speculative, supernatural things happening in the real world, as opposed to fantasy, where C.S. Lewis is creating Narnia, right? Or Tolkien creating Middle Earth, right? So that really appealed to me. So if I had to say, kind of like, the writer that I've read the most is Haruki Murakami. And so I really love, magical realism. Yes, I know some of his themes are problematic and all those kind of things, and we do have to kind of dissect that when we study him. But I love, like, he can take a character that's in either a rural area in Japan, or a urban area in Japan, Tokyo or what have you, and then there's, like, that character goes outside and there's full moons, and you're like, holy shit, what is happening, right? And so I love that sort of mix of those things. So I think I'm kind of an amalgamation of those influences. So what I would like to be doing, or like to say that I'm doing, is taking the sort of realistic Appalachian setting, which I know and I'm a part of and a product of, and then bringing in sort of the speculative or the horror elements into that natural landscape, if you will.
Yeah, because that's really, because like we were talking the other day, it was some people say there's no new ideas, there's no new plots, or they're sick of this trope or that trope or whatever. But the thing is that all writers, all creators, musicians, filmmakers, whatever, they're all the product of their collective influences. And you can get, like, you and I, we're of the same general generation. We've got the same movie influences, all that kind of stuff. Right. But, like, if we were to take those two influences, what makes them different and what makes something original is that when the creator puts themselves into the story and gives their own perspective on things, you can't duplicate that.
I think so. And I remember the thread we were talking, there's sometimes readers will say things like, this is a trope I've seen before, or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I think it's absolutely fair as a reader to say, like, I don't like what the writer did with this trope, or their use of it was not original. Because I've certainly read books like that. I've seen films like that. We all have. But to sort of condemn something as trope because the idea has occurred before is ridiculous, because most of what Shakespeare wrote was influenced by the Bible. Even Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who's considered the originator, like the godfather of magical realism, if you go back and read interviews with him, he would say, no, I'm not doing anything unique. I was copying Kafka, right? Mm-hmm. And so he said I was copying Kafka and mixing in local folklore, right? And so, and that's again, the sort of considered one of the masterpieces. His works are considered masterpieces of literature of any time period. And but he gave credit to Kafka for the ideas, right? So I think what we want to do with tropes is we do want to sort of bring something of the author's experience in there, something of the landscape of the people, or something like that. And the example that I love to use is Sinners, right?
Yes.
Amazing film that is getting, thankfully, the accolades it deserves. But if you just on the surface said, "Here's a vampire story in the South," well, Anne
Yeah.
Rice did that. The Sookie
From Dusk
Stackhouse
Till
did
Dawn.
that.
Like it has the same. A lot of the story beats are from Dusk Till
Absolutely.
Dawn. Two
Absolutely.
criminal brothers in a bar,
Absolutely.
vampires.
But it's done in
You know.
such an original
Yes.
way. And the other thing that's, I think, really significant about that work is you have characters that we care about when the bad things start happening.
Yes.
And
Yes.
someone reviewed my book and said it was horror with heart. And at first I was like, oh, no, I don't want to be cozy horror, right? But I actually like that, because to me, if you care about the characters, it really matters when they die. We've all seen action movies where somebody gets killed in the first 10 minutes, or a horror movie. It's like, I don't have time to care about this person. Like it was just there for like the gore of the moment, if you will. And so to me, it's much more compelling when we care about the characters and feel for them as they go through terrible things, right? So that's what I think Sinners really does well compared to a lot of other horror movies where we don't have that emotional connection to these characters. And so, when they become vampires, whatever, like, okay, whatever, like we don't feel anything. So I think that's the real power of that. So absolutely fair for a reader or a viewer of a horror movie to say, like, I don't like what this author or these filmmakers did with the trope, but I don't think fair to say, like, they used a trope we've seen 1,000 times. Yeah, so what? They did it in an original, interesting, exciting way and created something totally new out of what was there.
Exactly. That is absolutely true. Okay, so we're towards the end of the show, and this is probably one of my favorite parts of the show. This is what I call the lightning round of nerd questions.
I'm into it.
And yeah, you've been here before, so these questions are a little bit different than the usual ones I ask, but it's kind of like free association. I ask a question, you just kind of, first thing that pops into your mind.
You got it.
All right. Favorite movie overall in the last 12 months?
Sinners.
Excellent choice. I love the use of music in that movie also.
I do too. And again, that's something that's been done before, but not done that well. I mean, I think they did it in a unique, amazing way.
Yeah. I've said this before on the show. My favorite scene in the movie is where Sammy's playing his guitar at the juke joint, and he conjures the spirits of the past and the future. I remember the first time I saw that, and it was just like, wow. And then you see like the George Clinton, like Jimi Hendrix dude just pop up, and then all of a sudden there's the rappers and the twerkers and the break dancers, and I was like,
I love it.
Oh my God.
You had the musicians from the sort of the Irish vampires as well. Like,
yes,
it was important there.
Right.
And one piece that I didn't realize that I read in a review of the film is one of the songs I think it's "Pick Poor Robin Clean." I think that song was actually by a black artist.
Oh, so cool.
The use of it in the film shows these the evil vampires trying to speak the language of the black audience. And that was, when I learned that, I was like, oh my God, masterful. Just absolutely
interesting.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was interesting to read that.
Okay. Okay. The worst horror movie you've seen in the last 12 months?
Oh God, the worst horror movie I've seen in the last 12 months. That is tough. That is really tough. I'm gonna have to come back to that one. I have to think about that.
Okay.
There's a lot of them that I start and I stop. So I have the subscription to Shudder and several other services, and so sometimes if it gets too cheesy, I just can't go there. And again, sometimes like you feel like the horror effects are not earned in the sense that we don't care about the characters and so forth. So sometimes if I get that vibe, I kind of tune out.
Right. Favorite TV show of the favorite TV show of the moment?
Favorite TV show of the moment. There's a show called Smoke on Apple TV that I really like. That's focused on a pyromaniac wreaking havoc and the folks investigating. So it's kind of like a little bit of a twist on the police procedural. These are sort of like firemen and women and sort of forensic investigators trying to figure out this pyromaniac's motivations and what they're doing and how they're doing it.
Oh, that sounds
Cool.
very interesting. I'm gonna check that one out.
Smoke. It's called Smoke. Yeah.
Okay. The last musical album you listened to?
The last musical album I listened to, there is a Polish artist called Jacek, and he writes instrumental music, so it's very good for writing. But there's an album that he has called Songs for Film. I believe it's called Songs for Film, and it's the soundtrack for a Estonian folk horror movie called November, and it's really good. There's something about the international rights is the reason it's not called November. It's actually called Music for Film, and it's Jacek is the name of the artist. But I have listened to the soundtrack on a loop for weeks. It's amazing.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's
that
really
sounds
good.
good.
I'll send you a link.
Oh, cool. What's the last junk food you indulged in?
Last junk food I indulged in. I'm a big dark chocolate person, so when we make our trek to Trader Joe's, I always get the turbinado dark chocolate almonds, and they don't last long around here. They're really good.
What was the name of your first pet?
My first pet was Snoopy. I had a dog named Snoopy. He got hit by a car, but when I had him, I was maybe 4 or something like that, and so I mostly remember him through pictures. But yeah, Snoopy was his name.
First celebrity crush?
First celebrity crush, probably Lisa Bonet on The Cosby Show. I was absolutely obsessed with her, and then followed her film career after that, and and even like today, she's a beautiful lady and a great actor, of course.
If you were a superhero, what would your code name be? What would be your superpower? And who would be your arch nemesis?
Oh my gosh, that's a lot. What would my code name be? My code name would be Grits Daddy. That's one of my monikers on social media. For people that don't know, I'm a grits enthusiast, but I have very strong opinions about what you can put in your grits. It has to be something savory: salt, pepper good, cheese good, shrimp fine, no sugar, no honey, like nothing sweet. That's for your cream of wheat. That's for your oatmeal. That's just not for grits. So Grits Daddy would be my code name. What was the other question? I'm sorry.
What would be your superpower? And who would be your arch nemesis?
Superpower would be, I think that I want the superpower to be that I can tell goats what to do. That I can talk to goats through my head or something, and then they sort of do my bidding. I think that would be my superpower. I think that'd be fun.
I love it. I love it.
What was
Who would be your arch nemesis? Arch nemesis.
Oh gosh, my arch nemesis. I don't know. I was in a poetry battle last year with a lady named Nicole. She's Fiery Reads Brilliant Reads. Fiery Reads Brilliant something on Instagram. This is embarrassing. I don't remember. But she's probably going to be my nemesis because we went several rounds poetry battle, and I felt really bad utterly destroying her in poetry battle. But we wrote poems to each other that we could sort of diss tracks, if you will, but in a poetic way. So I would say it has to be Nicole.
Watch out, Nicole. The goats are going to come after you.
That's right. I'm going to wield them against you, and they're going to make you eat grits instead of. She's like a cream of wheat fan or something, which is really disturbing.
Oh, I love it. Favorite vacation spot?
Favorite vacation spot. So the favorite place my vacation spot is Scotland. I've only been once before, and just can't wait to go back. But I'm that weirdo that like. I grew up in the South, and I think this is part of it. Like a lot of people, their idea of vacation is like, let's go where it's really hot. And I'm like, I live in the South. No, thank you. And I did actually live for a while on the beach in Hilton Head. And so I've had enough of that. So to me, like I want a very temperate climate. People are like, it's going to rain a lot in Scotland. I'm like, and the downside is what? That's fine. I've got the rain park. I've got the hiking gear. We're good. And so that's my favorite vacation spot, and like a place that I would, love to spend time in. It's got to be the Flintstones. It's got to be Flintstones. I mean, Barney's really funny. I think that's kind of what does it for me.
Okay. You get to have dinner with any 3 dead historical figures. Who are they, and what do you ask them?
All right, so it's going to be David Lynch, obviously. I'm going to ask. I don't know exactly what I'm going to ask, but I'm going to ask about storytelling, and I'm going to shut up and listen to everything that he says. And one question I would ask him is, he does things in his films that are what we call like non sequiturs, right? Or unresolved plot points. And I love them. And sometimes I can ascribe meaning to them, and sometimes I have no clue. So I'd probably pick a few plot points that were non sequiturs, and make him tell me if there was any deep meaning there, right? So David Lynch, I probably would have to sit with Prince. I don't know that he would be like great company based on just anecdotes about what he was like in person, but I would have to try anyway to see if I could find out about his sort of creative process. And all right, the third one, that one's tough, but maybe like I think I do read a lot of James Baldwin, and I listen to a lot of like his lectures and so forth that are online. And so like I don't know that I have like a great question to ask him, but I would just like to listen to anything that came out of his head for an hour over beer or whatever.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So what's next for Andrew Clark?
So what's next is I'm nearing completion of a third novel, and I'm going to get that in the hands of beta readers probably in November. So this one is set in 1993 in Appalachia, and it deals with a haunted hotel. So there are the employees of this haunted hotel who are stuck there and can't leave. And so
I like that.
They're a little bit older. They're like 28, 29. And again, 1993. So the joke is my first book is set in the 30s. Second one is set in the 1980s. And now in 1993. So like maybe when I'm 80, I'll write like a contemporary novel in the year that I'm living in. But there's that book has been a lot of fun to write, and I'm excited to continue kind of refining it, go through the beta reading process, and some critique partner feedback, and hopefully get that out in the world maybe in a couple of years, something like that.
I'd love an ARC of that whenever it's ready.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I'll need ARC readers, and absolutely, you're on.
Awesome.
So,
any shout outs you want to give?
Oh gosh, shout out to the Threaderati. So on Threads, we have a group that we call the Threaderati. So I shout out to them. Very supportive of my work. I'd also shout out Tracy Searing. She is on Threads and Instagram and so forth, but she's putting together kind of a woman's activist group. And I've donated a book for like a raffle they did, try to raise funds, and donated to the group. But in essence, trying to kind of put together a group of folks that want to, speak up and kind of advocate for some of the folks who are being maligned in the current political moment, women, LGBTQ, IA plus folks, things like that. And so I really appreciate what she's trying to do. So I definitely want to shout her out. And if you don't follow her, it's Tracy Searing on Threads and Instagram.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So where can people find you online?
So probably the best place to kind of see what's going on with me is andrewkclark.com is my website. So I have a number of events in support of the book that are coming up. I'm going to be in the Decatur Book Festival this weekend with the Quill and Crow Publishing House folks. And then Thursday night, I'll be in Woodstock at Foxtail Bookstore with a great horror writer from Georgia named D.C. Phillips. So you can, on my website, you can see all that stuff. And then I'm on social media. My handle is the Andrew K. Clark on everything. So try to keep it simple. But I have some of those links on my website if you start there at andrewkclark.com. Have to do the K or you'll get a lawyer, I believe. So.
All right. And it has been so much fun talking to you tonight. I want to thank you for being a guest. I look forward to having you on the show again whenever your next book comes out.
I would love that. And thank you for thank you for including me, and then thank you for your very thoughtful reviews of both books. It's really it means a lot to the writer when you see someone connect the dots with some of the things that you brought up in the interview that go a little bit deeper than, this is, a horror novel, right? Which,
Right.
I think all reviews, but I really appreciate the depth that you go into with your work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And to all people watching, head over onto Amazon or thequillshop.com and grab yourself a copy of Where Dark Things Rise and all the other great Quill and Crow projects. And if you've enjoyed tonight's show, remember, like, share, subscribe to Critical Blast on YouTube. And that's it for tonight. The damn show is done. Bye.